Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. In the past, I've made a few videos now talking about the death of topics or how topics have changed over time in Wizard101. So for example, if you haven't watched my video on like Lore Master and how Lore Master died, or like Deer Knight and how the Deer Knight spell died, basically in those I go over how they initially were, how they changed, and my thoughts on whether they changed for the better and how I'd ultimately fix them. Well, there is a video that I've wanted to make since I made that very first video that I've kind of just held off on making until now, and that is the death of Wizard City in Wizard101. Now, I'm sure immediately when I say that, almost everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about, because Wizard City has changed massively since the beginning of this game, and it is basically unrecognizable compared to where it was about 7 years ago now. So in today's video, I want to talk about Wizard City, I want to talk about the updates, all of the changes that happened to Wizard City, and then I want to talk about the positives and negatives, and ultimately how I would fix this world that no longer really appeals to as many people. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Now to start off, we're going to chill in Headmaster Ambrose's office for a little bit to talk about the actual update in of itself. Now for those of you that don't remember, the Wizard City revamp started all the way back in 2018. Now the very first entry of the Wizard City revamp did not change the questline or anything, it just touched a lot of the graphics. This is the thing that changed like the Commons, Old Town, Ravenwood, all of the musics for those, and also I believe the character models were changed at this time. So the initial push for this update was just graphically charged. However, KingsIsle didn't stop there, because then they released the second part of it, I believe in early 2019, which changed the 3 streets to be updated and basically continued the graphic revamp from there. Now, KingsIsle actually took a 2-year break doing the revamp. It was a little bit weird because the next and final update to the Wizard City revamp, the one that basically killed Wizard City as a whole, was released in July of 2021. And this was the change that released the first time user experience changes and also massively changed the quest line of basically all of the streets. So the Firecat Alley quest line, the Cyclops Lane, Triton Avenue, Nightside, and the Haunted Cave, and all of those, that was released in this update. So there was a bit of a break, and then KingsIsle was like, let's kill Wizard City, I guess. Now I believe there was actually a third part of the revamp, and this one finished updating Crab Alley and Colossus Boulevard. Luckily, it did not touch those quest lines, it just changed the graphics of them, and that was the initial updates for the Wizard City revamp. They didn't really change anything else all that much. The only thing I can think of that they added beyond the initial graphic changes and actor changes and whatnot was the pet quest where you had to defeat Old Judd in Old Town and you got a starter pet and whatnot. Funny enough, I actually think that that was one of the better changes in the quest line. I know that it kind of interrupted the quest line a little bit, but I think it should have been changed into a side quest. If you didn't know, in the most recent spring update, they actually removed that quest, which I think is really funny because now there is actually no real pet tutorial in this game at all, which is weird. But either way, I digress. That was the main Wizard City revamp. It came in 3 parts. It updated the graphics, the music, the characters, and then ultimately it changed the quest line, and then finally it wrapped up with the side areas. And that has been the state of Wizard City for about 6 years ago now. Now, we'll get into it a little bit more later, but people didn't really like this because this update changed a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean that Wizard City is almost unrecognizable from how it was before. All right, now that you know about the revamp, let's get into how they actually changed each street. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically follow along with the quest line and talk about all of the major changes that happened throughout the different streets of the world and what exactly they changed. I'm not going to necessarily go that in depth with whether it's better or worse, but there are going to be some where I mentioned, yes, I actually dislike this significantly more than the original. Now, starting off with Unicorn Way, the very first quest of the game is actually different. If you don't remember, before you spawned in Merle Ambrose's office, and when you talked to him, he gave you a letter of approval, and you had to come talk to Private Stilson right here. Private Stilson would go, seems legit, I'll let you pass, and then he lets you into Unicorn Way. Now, Merle Ambrose just says, yoink, and teleports you directly into Unicorn Way, like right over here. It is like convenient, but it just feels like they removed a little minor bit of world building for absolutely no reason. Now, a few differences in Unicorn Way. First off, Saren Nightchamp's been moved over there. He was over here before, and he no longer has the same voice actor. Now he has a new voice actor, and he doesn't say greetings when you talk to him, which is just sad because I miss that nostalgic voice line. On top of that, you may notice as you're walking around, things are very different. You can't see here because I've already completed the street, but basically there is like Rattlebone signs everywhere and everything is dark and gloomy because until you defeat Rattlebones, everything is dark and gloomy on this street. Pretty cool update, nothing too major. However, they did also change the music here, which I'm not the biggest fan of. The questline has been changed minorly. Basically, you have to defeat some skeletal pirates now. Once you get to Lady Oriole, the Bone Cages quest and the Dark Sprite quest have been combined into one quest, and then from there you go back to Saren and you beat Rattlebones like usual. So honestly, Unicorn Way hasn't been changed all that much. The biggest change here actually comes from immediately post Unicorn Way, where before when you went to Sergeant Muldoon, he would send you back back to Unicorn Way to defeat Lady Blackhope, you no longer have to do that for the main quest line. That is now a side quest that you get from Private Orion, I think, over here, which is a bit weird, but I guess they just wanted to streamline the main quest a little bit more. That is Unicorn Way. Honestly, Unicorn Way is probably one of the least changed streets in the entire Wizard City revamp. Now, the next major change is immediately following Unicorn Way. You go back to Merlambros and he sends you to Ravenwood to get acquainted to all your professors. If you don't remember how this worked before, basically you had to go into each individual school one by one and talk to all the professors. Now they're just standing right here, and then it transports you to your own one where you can learn your level 5 spell, your 2-pip spell. Honestly, this was a good change. It streamlined things and there was no reason to go individual professor to professor. I think this was a good change and it streamlined things a little bit more. Now from here, we get to Old Town and we talk to Sergeant Muldoon. Now this is a very interesting one. As I mentioned, for a long time, the Secret Strife of Pets quest, I believe that's what it was called, was given to you by Sergeant Muldoon, where you went into this tower over here and defeated Old Judd and learned how to play as a pet. That has since been removed in the spring update. For console, it's still there. It was basically just a way to introduce pets and give the players a free pet. The fact that it's been removed is a little bit weird in my opinion. I think it would have made much more sense to turn it into a side quest, but whatever, I digress. I'll move on to Firecat Alley. So Sergeant Muldoon gives you the 3 quests for the 3 streets, as you would expect. Now coming into Firecat Alley, you are immediately greeted by a major difference, and that is the fact that Private Quinn is standing right here, and he is an absolute weenie boy now. I don't think there has been a character assassination in Wizard101 nearly as much as Private Quinn. Before, he was this like strong, manly man who was a friend of the Fire Elves and wanted to save his friends. Well, guess what? Now he's not. He has nothing to do with the Fire Elves really, and he's just used as a gag character to be scared of the different undead. It's honestly really, really sad, and old Private Quinn was my goat. New Private Quinn is quite the loser. Now moving on with Firecat Alley, there's obviously also Lizzo Firespitter, which since I did Firecat Alley so long ago, she's not here for me. I feel like I don't have that much of a problem with her. It's just a bit of like a, why would you make a modern pop reference when you know that they're probably not going to be as popular in a few years? And that is just kind of how it went. Like already it feels like an outdated reference, and it felt like an outdated reference at the time. Now there are some other changes. Like before, I believe you had to defeat and collect like 3 things from the Fire Elves. Now you just have to defeat 2 of them. Pretty easy. You talk to Greta Darkkettle, and before she would send you to get the charred knife from the Magma Men. Now she sends you to get Magma. It's just a bit of an easier defeat and collect quest, nothing too major. Now you have to defeat the Fire Elf Pathfinders over here, which was not part of the main quest line before, nothing too bad. And then Bastilla Gravewind, and then Prince Alacane as usual. So the main quest hasn't actually been changed that much. However, let's talk about the biggest part that has been changed with the main quest, and that's the fact that everyone is now an actor and like is a theater kid. And I absolutely hate this. Now I'm saying this as someone who was part of theater in school. I was a theater kid. I hate this. It just is so over the top obnoxious, and I don't find it funny. Like the fire for a friddle, like that, I dislike that, and every time I hear it, I kind of want to cry, knowing that they absolutely massacred what used to be a very, very fun and very wholesome quest line where you were saving some dude's friends and like you were helping the Fire Elves. Now you're doing it, but I don't want to help them because the Fire Elves are so annoying. That's not even mentioning like Bastilla Gravewind's annoying as well, and the side quests of this street have been made even worse. It's just not fun, and I dislike the new Firecat Alley inherently way more than anything else. That's not even mentioning the fact that there is that crazy Firecat Lady side quest that is probably my least favorite quest in this entire game now, where there is so much unskippable dialogue and the worst NPC you've ever met in this entire game. Next up, we have Cyclops Lane, and Cyclops Lane is actually probably one of the closest to the original. Nothing has changed all that much. You still talk to Nolan Stormgate as you did before. The only difference now is he has a completely new voice actor, and I preferred the old one way more. The old one was like snarky and kind of felt almost like he's a stuck-up myth guy, but he still has some redeeming qualities. Now he's just this like smarmy, over-the-top asshole character that I dislike. Now he sends you to defeat lumbering trolls. I believe that that's the same as before. Before, he would send you in the dark cave to get the ruined skull, which was one of the hardest defeat and collects in Wizard City back in the day. Now it's been changed, so instead you're getting like a Herkimer stone from the rotting fodder in here and then freeing these students from all the bubbles. Before, the students were locked in General Achilles Keep. Now you're dispelling the bubbles. Not that big of a change. It's nothing too major. I also skipped over the quest where you go talk to Cyrus Drake for his laundry. It's literally the exact same quest. I believe you do it right before the dark cave. It's nothing all that major. Now from here, the street ends kind of similarly. Instead of defeating the Warhorns to get the Warhorn Pass, now you have to defeat 3 of them, and then you beat up General Achilles. Now from here, we have one of my least favorite changes in the entirety of Wizard City, where there is that bunny called the Great One. This feels like KingsIsle was like, hey guys, we know how to make humor for kids, haha. Like, kids, you guys love bunnies and over-the-top high-pitched voices and like this weird, you know, random humor, right? Like, haha, so funny. I am not gonna lie to you, I think as a kid, I would have been pissed off if I saw the bunny, and right now, as an adult, I'm even more pissed off. Like, it is not funny. I highly doubt many kids are gonna find it funny, and my least favorite part about this, he was all like, I'll be back, like, grr, wizard, I can't believe you stopped me, and then he leaves, and I thought the funniest thing for the long time was that he never came back. I thought that was great because it was like, yeah, he was just a random one-off, like, side character. Well, guess what? In Selenopolis, they brought him back, and I was like, no, you removed the only funny part of that character is that he doesn't come back. And now he does in Selenopolis. It's just annoying. Cyclops Lane, I think, isn't as bad as Firecat Alley, but I definitely don't like the changes that they made. Now, finally, with the 3 streets, we have Triton Avenue. Now, honestly, Triton Avenue has probably been changed the most, but I'm a little bit mixed on these changes. Some are good, some are bad. Now, the main one immediately greets you upon entering Triton Avenue. Basically, now, instead of saving Ardor with Susie, we are saving Susie with Ardor. And I think that that's a really strange change because it almost feels inherently a little sexist, because it's like, why did they change it so that it's a damsel in distress story when that wasn't how it was before? It just feels a little bit weird. Like, that feels like they changed it for no reason, and it almost feels like the only reason why they would have changed that is to make a damsel in distress story, which in my opinion is just a little bit stupid. Now, on top of that, a few other minor things, like Duncan Grimwater isn't down here anymore, he's up there, and overall he's kind of a similar character where he's kind of a dick and he likes Malastare. Otherwise, there's nothing too majorly different about his character. You don't fight rotting fodders to get storm medallions anymore. There are other things, like you have to defeat the electric eels in the beginning of the street now. You have to collect these cogs, but overall the story is very, very similar. There are a few minor changes, but not nearly as many changes as there was to the other quest lines. Now, the biggest change actually comes right at the very, very end of the quest line, where when you save Susie from the Harvest Lord in the Galvanized Tower, now she's like, oh god, the street is gonna blow up, because they set it to blow up. So you come to this ledge here and you have to go talk to Hailstrom Baelstrom, who will be like, the Tempest Next is about to explode. That's not good. Here's how you fix it. And then you go fix it. It's really not anything like hugely disappointing, and I think Triton Avenue is the least egregious out of all of the changes to all of them. The only thing about it is the Ardor Susie switch, which I don't think is the end of the world bad, but I think it's just like, why did they make that change? Alright, now before moving on to fighting Foul Gaze and Lord Nightshade like you did before, there is actually one minor change that they added, and this is actually one of my favorite changes added to the new Wizard City, where Merle Ambrose takes you to Bartleby in Ravenwood and he talks to him a little bit and you get introduced more to Bartleby and more to Merle Ambrose's character. I think this was a really good addition to the questline and actually fits really well. I think it's one of the best things that they added and definitely slots in really well right before Foul Gaze. You go fight Foul Gaze, only now he's like studying up books to try to figure out the Necronomicon for Malastare. Not that big of a change, that's fine. Then you come to the Haunted Cave and you fight Lord Nightshade. Again, not that big of a change, but the biggest change that has been added here, and I think my least favorite in this entire quest line, is after fighting Lord Nightshade, you have to come to Daisy right here, the Velma ripoff character, and she has you fight a field guard. Now, the main issue I have with this is it just feels like it detracts from the climax of the world. Like before, Lord Nightshade was the big bad, the very final thing you did before moving on to Krakatopia. Now you have to fight a random field guard as the last enemy you fight, and it just feels a little bit weak, a little bit out of place, and honestly, kind of bad. Alright, now from there, we're on the last quest of the world, and this is exactly the same as before. You go to Nightside and you talk to Dworgen and you find the Death School. However, there's a major difference here where Malastare actually shows up and is all like, Dworgen, you're useless to me, I'm leaving. And then from there, he goes to Krakatopia. Now, honestly, again, this is one of my favorite changes in the entire thing. If they hadn't detracted from Lord Nightshade's fight, I think this would be one of the best decisions that they added to the Wizard City revamp. And honestly, like seeing Malastare, and we actually do see him like here, whereas before, the first time we saw him after the tutorial instance was in Marleybone, it just feels really nice and I really, really like it. So honestly, as a final quest change, that was pretty good. All right, now that right there was all of the main questline changes. I hope that that was a blast from the past and you remembered some childhood memories and it brought like a smile to your face or something. Now let's get into the other changes. Before I do that, I'm gonna throw on classic mode because I think it's gonna be kind of cool to like reminisce. Like, yeah, look at that. That it's ugly as sin, but that is old childhood Wizard City right there. Now to start off, let's talk about the questline changes. I already kind of mentioned them, but I absolutely hate the new Wizard City questline. I think that there are some benefits to it and it is fine overall in general, but compared to the childhood questline where it felt much less like, haha, here's another joke that you kids will love, right? It actually felt like an in-depth questline and a great introduction to this MMO game. Now it feels weirdly disjointed because Wizard City has some of the least serious and weirdest kind of reference humor in this game, where it's even weirder than like some of the later worlds. Like later worlds, people have talked about them not liking the writing. I think Wizard City is even worse in the writing in terms of those later worlds, and then that feels even more out of place because immediately we enter Krokotopia and the rest of Arc 1, and the rest of Arc 1's writing has not been updated to compensate for it. So it feels like this first world is like weirdly unserious and like, haha, here's what the game is going to be set up to be, and then Krokotopia through Dragonspire are ultra serious, like, yeah, you're fixing the issues of this world, and there's not a lot of humor at all. It just feels really, really strange and feels like disjointed even. So for the questline changes, I dislike them, not just because I dislike what it does to the world in of itself, but what it does to the arc, because I feel like there's probably a lot of people, especially with the console port, that tried out Wizard 101 and tried the first world, saw the story and went, you know what, this is not the game for me, when realistically Wizard City's story is weirdly out of place and even doesn't match up to the Arc 3, Arc 4 humor. Like, yes, it is more like Arc 4 humor than it is Arc 1 humor, but it still feels out of place even when compared to Arc 4 humor. So I don't know, I just feel like the questline changes are really not it, and it made a lot of these streets that used to be near and dear to my heart, like Firecat Alley and Cyclops Lane, actually much worse. If I were ranking all of the areas in Wizard City, I would say Firecat Alley used to be my favorite, and now it's probably my least favorite, and that is how far it has fallen. Alright, now beyond the questline changes, let's talk about another major aspect of the changes, and that is the first time user experience. Now, if you don't know what I mean by this, basically a lot of the questline has been changed and shifted to make it way more beginner friendly and make it for newer players. Now, very specifically, there's going to be quests that have been completely cut out of the game. There's going to be like defeat and collects being changed to make it a lot easier. Things like teleporters being added, new tutorial tips, all of that. Now, starting off, let's just talk about the streamlining a little bit. For Unicorn Way, it teleports you directly there. And I don't know why it does that to this day. It just feels a little weird because it removes Private Stilson, my goat. It feels like it's removing player agency. Like, why would you teleport us when we could just walk and get used to the controls even, like WASD and whatnot? Later on, they just straight up remove the Lady Blackhope quest from the street and move it to a side quest. I don't know if that was supposed to make it easier, but it feels a little bit weird because now the first boss of the game is no longer Lady Blackhope. The first boss is technically going to be whatever of the first 3 streets you do first. Now, a bigger problem I have, and one thing that I actually kind of dislike, is the changes to defeat and collect quests. Now, when I say this, I mean things like the Charred Knife. I mean things like the Ruined Skull. They have been removed completely and been replaced by the new type of defeat and collect, and I actually don't really like these quests, and that is basically defeat and collects, but they're just defeat and collects in name only. There is basically a 100% drop rate on all those quests, so what is the point of them being a defeat and collect to begin with? I think the Charred Knife and the Ruined Skull, they could have just boosted the rates a little bit and made it much more beginner friendly in that regard than what they did, where they completely replaced them with 100% collect quests. Honestly, I feel like collect quests, it was a good introduction to them to be like, yes, you're not going to get this 100% of the time, and it was a very memorable experience as well. Like, while it might not have been the most positive experience, I can tell you the amount of times that as a kid I got stuck on that quest, I could not get the Charred Knife, was insane, and it sticks with me to this day. Like, that is a very memorable and nostalgic experience. Now, in terms of the rest of the first time user experience things, I don't have that much of an issue compared to the other things. Like the teleporters being added, I think was overall a net positive thing. I think teleporters are really good for the game, and it does speed things up because newer players probably won't even know about them and they'll just keep walking past them. For older players, it gives them a way to go faster. I have no idea why they didn't add teleporters to Unicorn Way. To this day, that doesn't make sense to me, given that it is probably one of the longer of all of the streets. It does not have teleporters. It would have been so easy to add one right here and right here at Hedge Maze, but no, I guess we don't get teleporters for this street. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here is the tutorials of this world, and I feel like they just don't do a good job at all. And I don't understand why they talk about the first time user experience and I talk about like making it more beginner friendly, and it really feels like they don't do a good job of giving you a tutorial at all. I guess that the base tutorial from the original game made like 20 years ago now is supposed to be the major in-game tutorial, but it doesn't feel that good for modern Wiz, to be honest. And realistically, I think the best tutorials in this game are actually the side quests from Diego. So it feels a bit weird where they're trying to make it beginner friendly, but they didn't even do that good of a job making it beginner friendly. For our next section, let's talk about my biggest complaint with this world, and I don't think a lot of people will necessarily agree or disagree with me here, but it's something that I focus on so much more than other people, and it's something that affects me a lot, and that is the music. If you don't know what I mean by this, basically they changed all of the old music for new music. Now, I will say, I don't mind the new tracks. In fact, I think that the Commons is fine. I think that like Old Town music is fine. It's just a revamped and improved version of the old music, and I don't think that's that bad. However, there is some music that has been added and some music that has been changed that I think is just objectively worse and also out of place. Now, very specifically, the Ravenwood music, I'm going to be playing the old music in the background. I'm even going to increase the volume a little bit more than I usually do, just so you can kind of get the vibe of it. This is the old Ravenwood music. You haven't heard this soundtrack in probably about 7 to 8 years now, because when they updated Ravenwood, they removed it and replaced it with this. This soundtrack is one of my least favorites in the game just because it's very ambient and doesn't really match what I want from Ravenwood, where it's a mystical school of magic. This doesn't feel really mystical. It feels kind of weirdly like what I would expect from the Arcanum, which is what it's based on. It's based on the Arcanum theme instead, and I dislike that actively. Now, on top of that, there's a few other soundtracks that have been added that I think sound a little bit out of place. In Unicorn Way, there is the new music that plays at the very beginning of it where you're fighting Rattlebones off. It just feels like not very similar to what you'd expect from Wizard City music at all. It feels weirdly out of place. And this goes doubly true for the Triton Avenue theme that is very over the top and intense that I really dislike. It just feels like it doesn't match the rest of Wizard City all that much, and I dislike that immensely. So the music, I would honestly prefer if like they could knock on Nelson Everhard's door, the legend himself, and be like, hey, can you re-record the Ravenwood music and make the Ravenwood music like the old Ravenwood and match it to the rest of the new Wizard City music? That would automatically fix these issues for me, and I would like that way more. But maybe that's just a minor complaint that I focus on way too much. All right, now at this point, I have gone over all of the kind of major problems I have with it. I've talked about the first time user experience, I've talked about the questline changes, and I've talked about the music. Let me just reiterate something and what I want to stress before moving on to how I would fix it. I think the problem with Wizard City is that they severely dumbed down the questline and didn't make it better. I think the main issue with these changes is that it wasn't an upgrade. Like the revamp, the graphical revamp was amazing, right? I think that it was one of the best changes that they could have made to Wizard City. Like, look at this. It looks beautiful and it is really, really good. But the questline changes, the music changes, the first time user experience does not match up with this. I think it is just straight up, in 90% of cases, a downgrade. The only quest changes that I actively liked was when Merle Ambrose went to Bartleby and afterwards when you meet Malistaire in the Death School. The rest of the questline changes all feel extremely out of place, and the biggest thing is it just removes the nostalgia of this world to add a downgraded questline. You've permanently removed and permanently kind of just erased from this game 90% of players' immediate nostalgia. Anyone could make a new wizard and start Wizard City and be like, yes, this is what I experienced as a kid. Nowadays, nobody can do that because instead it is the new Wizard City questline that nobody has nostalgia for and is ultimately just a downgrade. So they remove the nostalgia for a downgrade that nobody really likes. So to finish off this video, let's talk about how I would fix it. Now, how I would fix it is a little bit strange because I think that realistically, does KingsIsle want to remove the new questline changes? Probably not. I imagine that that's not what they want to do. What I think would be good is if they could add some kind of selection in the character select where you could opt in to do the old quest line. Now we know that the old quest line is still in the game because people can still sign on with their very old characters and they still have the old quest line and the old dialogue and whatnot. So we know that all of the files are still in the game. We know that it's still possible. I think if they could just make a new versus old Wizard City option, it would fix the issue and be the best of both worlds, because newer players might select the new one thinking, you know, oh, it's new and improved, whatever, and old players would be like, all right, let me go back to nostalgia and play the old one. It would be the best of both worlds because it would mean that KingsIsle didn't waste their time, and it would mean that we as players get the nostalgia that we had before. Now, honestly, if for some reason KingsIsle doesn't want to do this, I would just straight up revert a lot of the questline changes all the way back to what they were before. In fact, beyond a lot of them, I would probably revert all of them. The only changes I would keep would be those two positive quest changes that I had from before. The rest of the questline changes are just straight up a downgrade in 99% of cases, and that is a shame. Nostalgia's been killed for literally zero reason, for a downgrade that nobody wants. But either way, I think that that's pretty much it for today's video. I hope I did a decent enough job of detailing the changes of Wizard City. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below, and let me know, what do you think about my proposed fix? Do you want to see old Wizard City back, or are you fine with new Wizard City? Like, what do you think about the newer Wizard City? Because in my opinion, this world went from like a or an S tier world all the way down to like a C or a D tier world, just because I think that the nostalgia is removed and now the new version is so much worse. So what are your thoughts? But either way, if you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like and sub button. You can also join and become a channel member if you want to. If not, that's fine as well. But either way, thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.